The place to start in all of this is to define what we mean by God. Obviously, if you ask 100 people what they mean by the word God, then you'll get answers varying from, well, I don't believe in God because I'm an atheist, through to the Christian God, the Judaic God, the Buddhist. Well, the Buddhists don't particularly believe in a God as such, but you'll get a lot of different answers. And because this piece is really about a more rational view to the whole thing, and specifically it's influenced by Spinoza's view on God, and depending on who you speak to, people will tell you that Spinoza was an atheist, but he was also called a God-intoxicated man. So the starting point for me is the very first paragraph in Spinoza's masterpiece called The Ethics, where he says the essence of God is existence. Now, for Spinoza, the essence of something, well, it depends whether it's something that stands on its own or whether it's something produced, but obviously if God is going to be God, then he, she, it stands on its own. And so the essence is the thing that defines it. So the essence of God is existence. And that's a real giveaway, because you can read through the ethics, and if you've missed that, then basically you will never understand what Spinoza is talking about. So he says the essence of God is existence. And, if you are of a devotional temperament, then this video is not going to be of interest to you particularly, because I'm not going to be talking about a devotional aspect of God, an emotional thing, because we're looking at something, a thing, an entity, whatever you want to call it, whatever word you want to put on God, that is not a human being. And so to a large extent the idea that God has emotions is really a little bit derogatory. We wouldn't really try and characterize ourselves by the behavior of an amoeba, and I don't think we should try and characterize God by our behavior. So God is existence, and that leads to a whole pile of things that are actually very, very powerful and very, very useful. Now, existence is the strangest of all things, and philosophers and scientists, will question endlessly, how come there's something and not nothing? Well, there is something, and the something is existence, and everything that we perceive and can know and think manifests within this context of existence. And so if you want to have some kind of mystical feeling about the universe, as Einstein did in actual fact, then existence is a good place to start, because it is mysterious. And the irony in all of this is that existence is right in front of us all day, every day, but we very rarely actually meditate upon or consider that existence happens, that we are part of it, that we exist ourselves, and that we are able to detect the existence of everything around us. Now, usually we are asleep to existence. We're asleep to it because we are, generally speaking, immersed in stuff. So we're sort of absorbed into our hobbies, watching TV, our relationships, our work, you name it, the 1,000,001 things that we do in life that absorb us. And it's sort of like we are seeing the trees but ignoring the forest. And the forest is the fact that all of these things exist and we exist. And if we want to know God, and for people who object to that word, you can really exchange the word God for the word existence. So if you want to know existence, then you have to give it some attention. And I will say right now that doing that is one of the hardest things that a human being can do, because it's our nature to become attracted to the properties of things, to whether they're interesting, whether they are attractive, whether we desire them, so on and so forth. And because of that, we are effectively asleep to the underlying platform, if you like, that all these things depend upon, which is existence. Now, in Western traditions, God is an entity that has human characteristics, as I've already mentioned. He has emotions, he has a purpose, he has intent. All of these things, for Spinoza anyway, are not properties of God. God is defined by existence. So by existence we mean the raw sensing of our existence and the existence of other things. And in fact, Spinoza, in his typical way, says that knowing God, and substitute the word existence if you want, is a straightforward matter. He says the human mind has ideas from which it perceives itself and its own body and external bodies as actually existing. Therefore it has an adequate knowledge of the eternal infinite essence of God, i.e. existence. Now, if you'd missed that definition right at the very first, or in the very first paragraph of the Ethics, you wouldn't really understand what that meant. He goes on to say, in that this is actually proposition 47 in part 2 of the Ethics. He goes on to say that this ability to know things as actually existing allows us to form what he calls the third kind of knowledge. Now, there are three kinds of knowledge. One is basically just unprocessed experience. There's the famous example of the black swans. Everybody thought that swans were white until settlers went to Australia and they saw a black swan. And so prior to seeing that black swan, everybody thought that swans were white. That is experience. And experience alone doesn't give us the truth. Experience is always disprovable. And then we have the second kind of knowledge, which is reason. And so reason allows us to establish that the sun isn't a disk that's maybe, 10 meters across and a few miles away in the sky. We know that the sun is millions of miles wide and 93 million miles from the earth. And we work that out through reason, through using geometry. And the third kind of knowledge he calls intuition. Now, this causes an awful lot of confusion among the people who read Spinoza and study Spinoza, even the academics who like to analyze every word that he wrote. It causes confusion because they miss this, for whatever reason, they overlook this particular proposition 47 in part 2, where he says that acknowledging or being aware of things actually existing, the direct perception of reality, is how we gain this third kind of knowledge. He calls it intuition, but he could have used another word, because with intuition we think of somehow knowing something through some innate ability to understand it. That's not really what he's talking about. He's talking about the direct perception of reality. So we come to an obvious question, which is, how do we use this in our daily lives? How does it help us to live our lives and to be more fulfilled? Because unless something does that, then it's probably useless in actual fact. Well, useless unless you like collecting information for the sake of it, which some people do. But in terms of a real impact on life, then we need something that we can do with it. And so, in part 5 of the Ethics, Spinoza does allude to what you might call practices that can be taken on board to make us aware of existence, because existence is God. And he says in part 5, it's proposition 14, he says the mind can bring it about that all bodily modifications, which are essentially sensations or images of things, may be referred to the idea of God, or existence, if you want to use the word existence. So there's a process of mindfulness that he's talking about, where we become aware that the existence of things is what is really important, our perception of the existence of things, rather than the characteristics of the things themselves. So, if I look at a pen on my desk, I'd never really noticed it before. If I look at it with some attention, I can see how the way the light has been reflected from it. I can feel its weight. I can see there are some words printed on it. And this process of attention actually brings about a more acute sense of the existence of this thing. And in Spinoza's words, this is referring things to the idea of God or existence. We can use other practices as well. One particularly well-known practice is body sensing, because when we talk about sensing existence, the most important thing to sense is your own existence. And body sensing is a way to do that, literally moving the attention through the body, a foot, the lower leg, a thigh, then the other leg and foot, and so on, and the buttocks and the back and the chest and the abdomen and the hand, and so on and so forth. Maybe taking 20 seconds or whatever for each particular part of the body. This has two benefits. One is it does still the mind, which means that you're not distracted. And the other one is that it allows you to sense your body more acutely and, by default, your own existence. So there are practices, and there are many of them, that allow us to more acutely sense existence and not be in the sleep of being fascinated with things. And the bottom line with this is that we are always working against gravity, if you like. Gravity pulls us down into the fascination with things. Fascination with a TV program, fascination with a partner, fascination with our work, a hobby, whatever it is. The attempt to sense the background of all of this, which is existence, requires an effort. And if you are so minded, then it's useful to do something along these lines every day. And you do become more aware of the unity of existence, which is essentially developing an intuition for the nature of God. If that word doesn't offend you too much. So Spinoza, rather, how can I put it, in a very abbreviated form really, within his ethics, gives us the clues to approach an understanding of God, although he does it in very obtuse language, it has to be said. But all the same, the words are there, the understanding is there to essentially make God knowable.